share your 30-second intro, maybe a minute intro if you need it, and share one interesting thing that people might not know about you. And I'm going to start with the man with the mic.
So
turn that sucker on.
Hello. It's working.
Technology.
It's working too well. My name is Ryan O'Connor. I'm the director of sales at DocSend. I like to get in uncomfortably early with early stage companies. My 30 seconds is I have a degree in music, which is as employable as it sounds. So I got into sales. Not before without earning this microphone sounds like it's kind of crackly. Should I change it?
Yeah. Yes. Loud.
Went and got my grad degree here in New York, moved on into music tech, where I was early at Ticketfly, which just sold to Pandora a few months ago for $500 million. Prior to that exit, I was at a company called Will Call, which I then sold to Ticketfly. And for the record, selling a company to your old boss is about as fun as it sounds. And since then, I've been helping a lot of early stage companies get up and running. I did a consulting stint at One Fine Stay, and now I'm over at DocSend, where we're working with the sales and marketing teams to better enable them to have deeper insights into the sales content they send. And it's me.
Oh, and the interesting thing.
I thought a degree in music was interesting, but I have a dog with almost 8,000 Instagram followers. I might be obsessed.
The music thing was cool. Oh,
Hey there, Russell Sachs. Little background about me. I actually started my career as a lawyer, practiced as a litigator for 5 years, and then realized that it was just a horrible way to make a living. And ended up co-founding a technology company, which failed. So one good thing about check that off my bucket list. You have to fail at something to be a successful entrepreneur. Co-founded a second company called Message One, grew that one, ended up having a successful exit, sold it to Dell, ran Dell's North American Services sales team for 5 years, and then joined a company back here in New York called WorkMarket, where I ran sales for 4 years. And I left WorkMarket about 6 months ago to join as the Chief Revenue Officer for a fast-growing company called BetterCloud here in New York City. That is a little bit about me. One interesting fact, I went to the Junior Olympics as a fencer. So there you go.
Nice. Hi, I'm Lisa Welch. I am the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales for Movable, Inc., a company based here in New York. I've been in sales for well over 20 years. I hate to say that, but it's true. Before Movable Inc., well, first of all, Movable Inc. has a contextual email marketing. What? Yeah. Movable Inc. Not me.
I can hear you.
I'm loud, so I can just, yell. So Movable Inc. is a contextual email marketing platform. What that means is we deliver highly hyper-relevant personalized content in email at the time of open. And that means it'll change based on where you are, what the weather is, what you've browsed in your on somebody's site. I encourage you to look at us because the ROI that we deliver to our clients is off the charts, and it's very exciting technology. Prior to Movable Inc., I was with a company called Workfront, which used to be called @Task. So it was project management. Had a fabulous 2 years there where we pivoted the company to go from standard project management into supporting the entire creative marketing function at companies. It was 120% year-over-year growth just based on a little pivot with who we were going to sell to, so it was fabulous. I also spent time at Oracle, I spent time at Salesforce, I spent time at startups. I've got a long and very interesting career purely in technology, always in selling software applications, and recently really selling into the MarTech or marketing function of organizations. Interesting comment. I attended the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 in May. And here's what's interesting about that. It was a hostage situation, and I managed to survive. My husband held me hostage.
Oh, jeez. All right. At some point, we'll have to have a vote on the most interesting, unique fact. But we want to talk about this concept of repeatability, and I have this theory where it builds upon this idea of habits, that builds upon processes, that builds upon methodologies. So getting to the core, we ourselves as sales professionals have to do things day in and day out, and a lot of that will depend upon how we actually run our days. So could you share maybe some of your own personal habits that help you stay on task, that stay focused, and to make sure you're able to handle all the things that you need to get done in the time that you have available? Anyone want to start off?
Is it a 24-hour day, or is it a longer day?
Well, I think most days are generally 27 to 28 these days.
Exactly.
But
so for me, time management, I'm also a list maker. I think you really need to be aware of how much time you're going to allocate to a certain task, and if you discipline yourself around completing that task within the allotted time, and as you do it, you get better and better around figuring out how much time you need to allot to complete a task. I'm also a big believer in top 3 strategic or key things that you're going to focus on for a day, a week, a year, depending on what part of the planning you're in. This is something that Ray Lane at Oracle was actually famous for. He would have a top 3 list. It was actually 5, because once he completed a task or an initiative, he would have something to sort of pull in, so that he always had top 3 things to work on. So for me, it's time management and prioritization. And then those are the 2, and I'm a big believer in 3. And then the third thing that you have to do to manage all of that is you have to carve out some time to deal with emergencies, because they always come up. So what's the biggest, hottest problem that's come up that you need to deal with?
Yeah, so my wife has what she would say that I have shiny object syndrome. So which I'm sure a lot of sellers do. It's you bounce around from task to task. It's part of the attraction of the job for me anyway. But it makes it very hard to get things done. And so, kind of jumping off what Lisa said, I make lists every single night and every morning. And at night, it's recapping the day, and it's being ruthless with what I need to get done. Unless, of course, a huge prospect calls and is like, I want to buy. But but anything that's outside of getting that done, especially internal meetings can kill your productivity. And so we, as a general rule of thumb, have all of that outside of market hours. So we're doing 7:30 a.m., 8 o'clock in the morning. Like, that's when we're doing our pipeline sync, our process, stuff. We're reviewing what's working, what's not. And at the end of the day, it's about going through and making sure that everything got checked off, and if it didn't, it gets piled over into the next day. But I try to make sure that that's at a minimum.
Yeah, those are great points. Lists are huge. Keeping the calendar tight is a really important point for me. If it's scheduled for 30 minutes, at 30 minutes, I'm stopping the conversation and I'm moving on. I think the other thing is, sales is an evolution, and it's a journey. And so for me, one of the habits I make is every single morning before I start my day, I try and get a quick read of what's happening in the world around me, what's happening with fast-growing companies. I try and educate myself every single morning. Every single evening before I leave, I will look at my calendar for the next day. I'll make sure that I understand what the meetings are. When I have my meetings, I expect a purpose statement. What is the purpose of this meeting? Why are we having this meeting? And do we have the appropriate amount of time? And so as my team gets to know me and work with me, they won't schedule an hour if it should take 30 minutes. And if it should take an hour, they'll put an hour on the calendar. And so I think it's really, discipline is one of the most important things, especially as a sales leader, and leading by example, because how you hold yourself out is how your team will emulate, right? And so it's really important that when you create habits, those are habits that you want to see the rest of the sales organization adopt.
I think following on that, thanks. I think following on the conversation around time management, because that seems to be the biggest challenge that any of us have in sales is, what are we working on? But there's also those times when it really just becomes overwhelming because you have so much stuff that may be coming in, which is obviously a good thing if that's the case. But at the same time, there's a lot of that stress that builds up. And in a couple of days in San Francisco, we're going to be talking about this concept of mindfulness. But I want to just ask you, do you have some things that you do from a habit standpoint or things that you've done that just help to kind of de-stress and so you can kind of refocus and stay motivated? Anyone can start.
I make exercise a routine, even if it's just a little bit. If I can't get a full workout in, then and it's just a run down, the Esplanade with my dog for even half a mile just to get me out in the morning doing that, which kind of seems to sort of reset my body, get the juices flowing. That's one of the habits I try to do on a daily basis. So, drinking's another one. That's why I showed up here. Don't lie, it's why half of you did too.
Personally, I'm a transcendental meditator. So I've been meditating for almost 25 years. It changed my life. I started when I was in college, and I shouldn't say that because then you know how old I am. I started in college, and it literally changed my life, and it's 20 minutes twice a day. So I meditate on the train on the way in, and I meditate on the train on the way home, and it resets me completely. So that's huge for me. But the other thing that I do, and I think this is a tip that we can all deploy personally and also when we're setting meetings with customers or prospects, don't ask for an hour, don't ask for 30 minutes. Schedule a 45 or a 50-minute call or a 25-minute call. And when you do that, you say, I'm not going to take up your whole hour because that extra 15 or 10 minutes in between meetings, you need just as much as I do. And that has had a profound impact on our ability to schedule meetings and respect people's time and get something from them and give something in return.
Yeah, I really like that. Just
Yeah.
The whole approach of not trying to bunch in, because how often do we have calendars which are literally
Back to back
meetings,
Yep.
and you don't have any downtime.
No.
When are you actually going to maybe record some notes, for example, or plan for a next meeting?
All right, you got to pee and get a glass of water. When are you going to do that? Really? So you have 10 minutes or 15 minutes in between. And I think when you ask somebody for that amount of time and you explain why you're not taking an hour or why you're not taking the full half hour, they respond to that. They think that you are respectful and you're thoughtful, and they are more inclined to give you a very productive 20 or 40 or 45 minutes than they are saying, yeah, okay, I'm going to give you an hour on my schedule.
So Russ, I got to ask you, is being a lawyer more or less stressful than being in sales?
Oh, God, it's like they're both stressful. I got to say, I have lived in I have so much stress. Being in sales is much more fun, though. Being a lawyer is stressful because you're advocate. And I started as a criminal lawyer, and so someone's life is really depending on you. And we're playing for different stakes as salespeople. And so one of the things that I constantly try and remind myself and my team is, hey, we got to take this serious. We have to be professional. But at the end of the day, lives are not at stake, right? In terms of habits and de-stressing, exercise is huge for me. Getting out of the office and clearing my brain is huge. I tell my team the mantra is when you're here, and when you're out, you're out. And so on the weekends, I have two small kids. I try like mad to put my phone away and spend my time with my kids. When I'm out to dinner, I put the phone away and I talk to the people that I'm sitting at dinner with. It's amazing how many people at dinner, I'm like, are you texting each other? Because we're all at dinner at a table. And so it's really compartmentalizing your life versus your work and balancing those. And that has really helped me kind of stay fresh and stay motivated and come to work every single morning invigorated to go take on the day. Because the one thing that's so amazing about sales, every day something great can happen. Every day you can create something great. And that is a true treasure compared to other jobs, right? I don't look at it as a mundane, doing the same thing, because every day you can achieve greatness.
That's actually a super important point, because we forget, as salespeople, you actually are initiating change in the lives of the people and companies that you're engaging with. So, actually keeping that perspective top of mind, I think, is really important. I want to just kind of, before I even do that, I always have this question, like, morning person, night person. Russ?
Definitely a night person.
Night?
Morning.
Morning. I'm definitely in the morning. I don't know, I just feel like I was so used to waking up at 4 in the morning for trading in London that, to me, I just got used to it, right? But then I fall asleep at 9. So if I'm not all that sociable at the end of this, it's probably because it's my bedtime. But I want to move on to process, right? Because organizationally, trying to get all of the different moving parts in the sale aligned is obviously a huge challenge. And I just want to clear up, just from your perspectives, we hear this thing called sales process, and we hear this thing called sales methodology. Are they the same? Are they different? What opinions do you have on that?
I think process and methodology are different. I think a sales process are the steps that you take to get somebody from interest to contract to closed won. I think methodology is how do you engage with that person. Do you want me to name methodologies? Or?
Yeah, sure. I think share like the different types of methodologies.
So I've done some work with Sandler, which I think is a great. Have anybody done Sandler training? Raise of hands. No. Nobody in this room has done Sandler.
There's a couple.
Okay.
Very shy crowd.
Yeah.
Raise those hands high. This is a sales group.
Yeah, Sandler is an older methodology, but it's sort of table stakes. I mean, I think they're really good and consistent, terrific. It's one thing to sit in a classroom in our environment and listen to sales methodology or sales training. It's another to put it into practice. So I'll just put that out there as a cautionary, not as cautionary note, but just something to be mindful of. You learn when you're actually in a sales call. You don't learn sitting, practicing with your manager. You learn when you put it into practice. Challenger sale is another one. Anybody do challenger sale? More challenger? Yep. So I think both are equally as important. In fact, we're looking at graduating from Sandler, not graduating, but moving from Sandler and going into Challenger to a certain extent. And then just the third one that I like is the serious decisions model. That's more of an alignment of sales and marketing working together, but they do some great work around analyzing a sales process and what your discipline is and applying it to and evolving your sales team. But process and methodology are very different. It's kind of how you go through a sales cycle and then what you do when you're in a sales cycle.
Yeah, I'd agree with Lisa that sort of learning and doing are two totally different things. My first big sale ever was at Eddie Bauer when I was in high school, and I had a kid come in with his mom, and the mom left the kid with a credit card. And if you guys ever seen Modern Family, he reminded me a lot of Manny. Anyway, we ended up doing an $800 sale, which is huge. But in the training at Eddie Bauer, they make you watch this video where they're like very, very obvious things like, oh, if somebody walks in and they're looking at pants, perhaps offer them a belt. And it's like, well, no shit. So, but this kid and I are going through the store, and we're having a great time. And I'm learning what he likes in school, his after-school activities. He's on the debate team. And when he said debate team, I said, you know what? Pleated pants. That's the way to go. And so we started going through and putting all these outfits together. And I literally had a guy come in, another associate, walk up to me and literally say to the guy, I see you have a lot of pants out here. Let me show you some belts. And I was like, oh, and he just killed it. He killed the vibe. He killed the mood. He totally killed the sale. We ended up moving forward, which is great, but to Lisa's point, methodologies versus practice. We at DocSend imply more of a challenger attitude, and there really was no formal process into instituting that. It was, we kind of all got into a room, we're talking about what we liked and we didn't like. We enjoyed what we read, it had worked for us in the past, and so we just kind of went on and implemented it. We also do a lot of spin selling, where we really, I think spin selling, asking obvious questions makes you look transparent as a seller. You've got to first and foremost know the business that you're walking into. For example, I sell to a lot of media clients. So I know the relationship between the media company and the agency they work for and the client that they protect. And that's just something I did on my own. And so when I have this conversation and I'm posing these questions, yes, they're somewhat self-serving, but they're always aligned with what the buying process is for my client. And so, and it creates that urgency and that sort of uncomfortableness. So that's kind of the two things that we use.
Challenger sales, certainly something that's very top of mind. it's actually gotten a lot of press in the recent years. I actually have been using MEDIC, which is a sales methodology that I've been applying last 15 years at least. And it has stayed true regardless of what you're selling and how you're selling, and it's a framework that lets you understand through the buyer's perspective and ask great questions to figure out where you stand within the sales process, what you need to know, what you don't know, what are red flags, what are uncertainties, and so you literally are using the process as a roadmap to get you from interest to execution. It has worked fantastic for me over the years. Whatever the process, whatever the methodology is, so long as it maps to your process, and so long as it's a framework that everyone can understand and apply, you'll be successful. And as a leader, I think the one thing that I would just pound the table on is you have to lead by example. I am passionate about not sitting in a cube and talking to my sales rep and telling that sales rep, go ask these questions. I say, go set up a meeting and let's go together and watch me apply MEDIC, but if you have partners, it's a little nuance. Let me show you by example how you ask some of these questions. That's the best way. There's a lot of sales leaders that coach without executing. You can't be a credible sales leader if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves and go out into the field and apply the methodology that you're teaching to your students.
So, I just want to maybe hone in, particularly challenge yourself, because you've got, obviously came up quite a bit, and it seems to be a common theme. Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions about, what does it mean to actually implement Challenger Sales? It's a great book, but what does it actually mean in practice? And I think something that you said, which was really interesting, we talk about the sales process, about what we do, but really that process needs to work across an organization, from customer success as well as marketing. So there's this whole alignment thing. I think Challenger Sale is actually very much aligned there. So what are you doing in terms of actually putting in place or making the type of Challenger Sale methodology actually actionable in the sale?
So part of the process, teach, train, take control, sort of the basic tenets of Challenger Sale. And that's one of the things that we do a lot is we tell in stories, we talk in stories. Nobody ever at DocSend will speak as far as features versus benefits. It's almost a fireable offense.
So what do you mean by story?
Yeah, so a great conversation we have, using the media company as an example. We work with Mike.com, great millennial-focused media company. As soon as they signed, we went in and learned everything about their business, from their audience size to their demographics they go after, the top accounts that they tout on their website. I mean, we really dove in with their sales team to learn about their process and how they were using our product in tandem with that. And so every other media company that we were talking to, we started dropping numbers 30 million monthly unique visitors at Mike.com. I'm sure you see something similar. And it kind of picks them up, where they're like, oh, the metrics that I'm involved with. And yeah, let me tell you how they use it. They do proactive outbound. They also use it in the RFP process. Not sure if you guys, where your split is in terms of, how you divide your pipeline versus RFP versus proactive outbound. Theirs is about 50-50. Is that something that you guys deal with? And they go, yeah, that's actually something we do. It was would you like to do more outbound? And the answer is always, yes, of course, I'd like to be the master of my own destiny and do more outbound. Well, then let me tell you how DocSend can enable you to do that. And we started talking about how Mike does it and how they approach their accounts. And that's some ways that we've implemented the process.
Any other thoughts about using Challenger just in the course of your regular sales? Or maybe how you've been able to apply the content side? Because I think that's always a big struggle is you want people to challenge, you want your reps to challenge, but you need to give them information to challenge with.
Yeah, this is more applicable if you're doing an evangelical sale, all right? A lot of startups are creating a space or creating a quadrant that doesn't yet exist. And so a lot of your customers don't know they need what you're selling. And so how do you educate a customer that not only do they have pain, but that you have a solution to map to that pain? We took a step back when I joined BetterCloud to say, okay, let's look through the lens of our buyer and understand what is the process by which a buyer would go out and educate themselves on whether a pain exists, how we solve that pain. And so we've created a bunch of content that highlights, well, so to understand a little bit about BetterCloud, so we built a SaaS-based application that allows organizations that run multiple software packages in the cloud, a single pane of glass, so I can do the administration and security for all my SaaS applications through one console. Well, a lot of these companies, they're using Zendesk and Slack and Google and Salesforce, and they administer each one independently, and they don't even realize how much time they're taking to apply, to administer each of these SaaS applications when people leave, when they come on, when they're onboarded and offboarded. How do they secure all that information? And so we do an education process, which is, do you realize what the average time it takes for an IT administrator to do provisioning and deprovisioning for a single user? Now extrapolate that by the number of users that you onboard and offboard in a given month and a given year. And so you walk them through this logical analysis where they come to this eureka moment, which is say, holy shit, this is madness, right? I'm spending how many man hours doing nothing but provisioning and deprovisioning? There has to be a better way. If they don't buy into that, then you're barking up the wrong tree. The one thing that a salesperson needs to cherish more than anything else is their time. And so are you wasting time chasing somebody that is not a buyer? And part of the challenger method is to get to that decision point, which is say, either, yeah, this is something of interest, or no, it's not, because the second best answer a salesperson can get is no.
It's almost like actually applying it back to Medic, which you mentioned, just having a very rigorous process about actually how you qualify in and qualify out. Maybe we could dig a little bit more into that. But I did want to ask you, Lisa, on this question of trying to justify or to build some sort of business case. You talked a lot about ROI, and I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of people in sales, we talk about ROI in the sales process, and we totally blow it. So what have you done at Movable Inc. to kind of to tell a credible ROI story, not the ROI story that most buyers kind of roll their eyes at?
Yeah. So for us specifically, there are metrics that we, if people know, it's, how many emails do you send, what's your open rate, what's your click-through rate, what's your conversion rate. There are specific metrics that if a company in email knows these, they give them to us. And then what we've done is we have used our existing customer base and we've benchmarked where they've started and where they've gotten to based on implementing Movable Inc. So we have a set of empirical data that is defensible that we use to create an ROI calculator. It's kind of very simple. I think there's 3 metrics that we put in: click-through rate, conversion rate, average order value. There's an efficiency calculator that we use as well when it comes to talking about efficiencies. A little more elusive than the hard dollar sort of average order value kind of stuff. But what we like to do, we can get an 84% lift in use of email, which is pretty high. But what I always say to somebody is cut it in half and cut it in half again. And if you still have sort of a positive result out of that, what are you waiting for? So our empirical data says 84%. That's in a perfect world. That's when you have, all of the features and all the functionality deployed and it takes a while. That's when I say cut it in half. Are we good here? Nope, cut it in half again. And it depends on the industry that you're calling on, but when you get to a JCPenney or a Kohl's or somebody that sends billions of emails a year, the ROI calculator looks a little ridiculous. But if you cut it in half and cut it in half again, you can still have a meaningful discussion. So a lot of it really depends. ROI truly depends on if you have metrics that are measurable and defensible versus selling on value, which is kind of a nuanced way of, I still think everybody should sell on value. You deliver value whenever you sell a solution to somebody. However you quantify that is what we're all here to figure out. But that's kind of where we are.
So just want to ask a quick question because Medic, I don't think a lot of people may be familiar because we hear a lot about Sandler and Challenger, and I think there's a Miller Heinemann, those are more spin. But can you maybe just elucidate a little bit more just on that alone and Medic? That kind of sounds like a really medical type of term.
Yeah. buckle in. It would take a while. So Medic was actually born out of PTC, which is a software organization, one of the greatest sales organizations, software sales organizations. And it's an acronym. And the acronym stands for money, economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, identifying pain, champion, and competition. And the P, I said MedPick, because if there are partners involved, that's the other acronym. And for each of those, do you know, for example, do you know who the economic buyer is? Do you have access to the economic buyer? Does the economic buyer know that you're even talking to anyone within his organization? And so each of these acronyms, there is a set of questions that we deep dive in to better understand how qualified is this opportunity and how real is this opportunity. And based upon that information, we drive to a more accurate forecast. One of the biggest challenges, and I'm just gonna, because you asked a question, you opened up Pandora's box, I just gotta go back to this. So we tie our sales process to stages. And MedPick helps us understand where we sit within the buyer's journey. And we put hard gates that say, well, if a buyer hasn't made an indication that they can purchase within the next 90 days, you cannot move it to 50%. And the reason why we do this is because, Mark, your 50% and my 50% may be two very different 50%. And so we try and remove guesswork out of the equation. And so especially in earlier stage organization, you want to try and put some rigid benchmarks through each gate that says, until you get this checked off, you can't move from 30 to 50%. Until you get this checked off, you can't move 50 to 70%. And how we apply and figure out where we sit is applying MedPick and understanding all of these. I am happy to spend an hour talking about MedPick. I just did a 3-hour training with my sales team this week, so I'm ready for this.
So I guess, following on that, I'd really like to dig in and, could you give maybe an example of actually setting up a process? Because you came into BetterCloud not too long ago, you're DocSend not too long ago, you're saying Lisa, Movable, and so you've had to go into an organization which already had something in place and potentially change some things. What does that process look like, and how do you actually go ahead and re-engineer a process to make it better? Lisa?
Sure. This is, it's a bit unusual. When I came to Movable Inc., they thought they had a process, and the reality is there wasn't a process. They had 3 stages in the pipeline or forecast with 0 probability and 0 value in the deal. And I'm like, well, by definition, that's not an opportunity. They're like, I know, but we're going to go from 0 to 50%, that's going to close. And I'm like, well, so then you have no, and there was no pipeline, there was no discipline. So I just put in what I thought is just a standard sales process, just to get everybody sort of on the same playing field. First part is discovery, then we would go through an initial presentation, then there would be a tailored demo, then there would be a proposal stage, then there's negotiation and close. So I try to keep it at 5 steps. We are revisiting it just based on the level, just sort of the maturation of the sales team, or I would say education.
And just quick
Sure.
aside on it, how much of the experience on the buyer side has influenced that?
A lot, and they still continue to influence what we do. So for instance, now we are sort of compressing the discovery and the initial presentation stage. So there's, when we work with SDRs, a lot of the time they'll have an initial call, and then we'll say, okay, well, we need to schedule sort of a discovery call with our sales rep. And then we'll go in and we'll ask the same questions and frustrate the prospect. Well, nobody wants to do that. That's not the intent of anything. And that also is sort of an artifact of how immature the SDRs were, and they weren't finding out the right information, they weren't qualifying properly. So now we have an opportunity to say, okay, the next call that we're going to have with an account executive, we're going to just summarize what you've done, and we're going to give them, in essence, a mini visual presentation. And if somebody says, this is great, I get it, I want to go into a demo, guess what? We'll give them a demo. As long as the qualification criteria is there and we're constantly requalifying, I don't want to shorten a sales cycle. I don't want to elongate a sales cycle. We want to shorten it. So again, if I don't want to just go to a demo because what am I going to demo? Do you have budget? Can you buy a pencil, let alone a piece of software? Hello, economic buyer. So, we have to get much better at qualifying all of that. And then if we have somebody on the line, we'll accelerate. So that's the thing I just wanted to say, I was talking about before, whatever process you have, you must have flexibility. You must be flexible. This is what I tell my sales team. In lieu of experience, because a lot of the new sales reps that we have, they don't have experience. Here's what I tell them. Bring critical thinking skills to your job every day. You must know how to critically think. You have to problem solve. You have to pivot on your feet. You have to respond to somebody in a meeting based on a question they ask or an audience member that you're not prepared for, etc. Preparation, preparation, preparation. If you have a PowerPoint presentation that you've prepared, I can't tell you how many times everybody insists upon going through their prepared PowerPoint presentation. I can't tell you how many times they lose the audience because they're not reading the audience and all they want to do is get through the material that they've presented. That's a fireable offense in my world. Yeah. If you can't pivot and answer a question and go from slide 4 to slide whatever, you're not going to be with me for a long time. So bring critical thinking skills. This is a critical thinking process. What we do as sales professionals, so I tell everybody every day, it is not easy. It is not easy. It's never going to be easy. That's part of the reason why good salespeople make a load of money, because they work hard, they know how to critically think, and they know how to respond to the people that are in the room, and they know how to run a sales cycle.
Yeah, I think Ryan will like this illusion. You almost look at it as your process is the notes on a page, but the way you play it is jazz often.
Exactly.
Yeah, you gotta improvise. Yeah, totally. I'd speak to that. Like, how many people in the room are founders? This is early stage, or you're in early stage companies. So I've been Ticketfly when it was Series A, Will Call when it was seed, DocSend when it was Series A. So I've gone into a few organizations where there basically was no process. Ticketfly, we were doing deals on the backs of napkins. And so but just to kind of reinforce Lisa's point, because I think it was very well made, if you just come to it every morning understanding that something is going to change and you need to evolve. DocSend, we formally started an outbound sales process like in October. Meanwhile, we've had 20,000 different companies sign up for some free or paid version. And we went in and we're like, okay, like how do we build a process? Let's start from square one. And so we kind of started with the 5 basic, prospecting, qualifying, proving, going through the rigmarole. And now after several months, we've realized that that's not good enough. We're doing okay. Candidly, we're doing great, but we're not up to our expectations yet. And so we are bringing in everybody who will give us advice, who's been there and done that, and taking in that criticism and absorbing it and refurbishing it in terms of something that's useful for our process. So my advice to any of you early stage guys out there is seek those advisors, seek those that have failed, like guys who have blown up, who failed businesses before. I've blown up businesses before. I think it's something you should look for when you're seeking an advisor out. Because what Lisa just gave you was absolute gold.
So if you're taking over the role for whether it's an early stage or a more established stage company, I think the first thing that you do is inspect what's working and what's not working, right? I'm not going to change the sales process if the process is working. But I think the thing is to be thoughtful. So, when I create sales processes, it's not about, for us, it's not discovery and then demo, and then because, especially if you're selling into the enterprise, well, discovery is a continuous journey. Demos, you're going to probably do 2 or 3 or 4, right? Depending upon your audience and how many buyers get in. So we do it in terms of, opportunity identification, opportunity qualification, opportunity advancement, opportunity negotiation, right? So that at each stage, there are a series of actions within that stage that should happen. For instance, early on, you should be doing discovery. You should be doing an initial presentation. So we define it within each stage, what are the actions that should be taken? And so that you go from one step in the journey to the next step in the journey to the next step in the journey. But I think along the way, one thing that Lisa said, which is spot on, which is, you're given tools. but those tools are to help you choreograph the dance. I had a sales rep, we went into a meeting, and he had spent all night prepping his presentation. And we spent an hour and 45 minutes just listening to the customer's problem. And we came out, he was like despondent. He's like, I didn't get a chance to present. I'm so sorry. I was like, are you kidding? This was the best call we could possibly have ever had. We got more than we, and so part of that is just is playing the cards that you're dealt and knowing when to ask questions and knowing when to shut up. You know, we've got one mouth and two ears, so you'd be listening twice as much as talking. And like salespeople by nature think, oh my God, I crushed that demo. I killed it. How many questions did you ask? Right, none. Right, so people love to hear themselves present. They think that's the way it should be done. What you should be doing is getting around to the other side of the table and understanding your buyer's problems. Do you have a problem that I can solve? If the answer is no, great, move on.
Okay. So I want to open it up to the audience. If you have any questions? Oh, immediately. Please. Oh.
As we've been building out our sales team, we're looking into how technology can enable us. To what extent are you using your CRM tool or how optimized is it around your particular workflow? I'm seeing so many different platforms, from SalesLoft, Salesforce, to buttons that click, to things that project on the ceiling, gamification. All of it looks interesting. I can see the value it offers. I'm curious how you are employing it in your organization, whether or not it's been effective.
I'm a fan of buttons you click CRM. It's really great. Anyone want to take this?
So full disclosure, I sell a sales enablement solution, so prepare yourself for the shameless plug.
Shut down, don't listen. No.
So we're a small team, and we have to scale. And so that's our biggest problem, and we're full pipe. We're hiring BDRs now to take on that initial part of qualifying prospects for us into opportunities. But it's all done by us. And so we use SalesLoft, and candidly, we leverage DocSend too in almost every touch point we have, because we want to be adding value. So dive into really quickly DocSend. So it's a link-based model that's essentially the best way to send and present your sales content, case studies, proposals, white papers, etc. The reason why it's great from a seller's point of view is because we track and analyze the crap out of it. So I can tell any entrepreneur in the room who's sending a pitch deck to a venture capitalist, I can tell you right now, based on our data, that the VC who spends 3 minutes and 44 seconds on your pitch will take your meeting. And that the optimal deck length for your pitch should be around 19 slides, and I can tell you exactly precisely the right order of content. That's what we do at a high level when we analyze your content. But from a sales perspective, we also instantly notify you. So we leverage DocSend to do that. So we have our cadence that we structure through SalesLoft. We do our initial outreach. We insert our content. We move that along. We don't do we don't do like an auto dialer in our follow-up calls. That's all done by hand. But we leverage truly wireless so that we record every single conversation we ever have, because we're bringing on BDRs and we're building the playbook while we're doing it. So it's essential for us for reflection and review. Back to the example, when you hear yourself play at a concert, you can really evaluate your abilities. Hearing yourself talk, it'll make you cringe, but it will make you better on the phone. And we use Salesforce. Everything links back to Salesforce. If it doesn't get in Salesforce, it doesn't get done, and you don't get paid, which is the way that we, motivate our sellers to make sure everything is in Salesforce. But there are a lot of weird stuff out there. So something for like a button in Salesforce, click, and you can send a prospect a cup of Starbucks. I don't know what that's about, but it was kind of interesting. But that's our stack, and I'm happy to talk to you about how we do it a little more in depth if you want to go.
So, our core is Salesforce. That's our CRM. We built our workflows into Salesforce. We've actually built MEDPIC into Salesforce with the stage gates. We use RingDNA as our calling platform. We use Sales Navigator as outbound prospecting tool. There is a lot of terrific sales enablement tools out there, almost to the point where it's information overload. There's so many technologies, right? So whether it's Inside Squared or Sales Loft, ClearSlide. I mean, there's actually. We don't say ClearSlide around here. Sorry about that. There's a great. I forget who did it. There was a great VC deck that went through all the different sales enablement tools, and what you're seeing is just this. It's bursting at the seams. And so as a sales leader or as a founder, what I would say to you is there's a lot of cool technologies. What is the end in mind, right? What are you trying to achieve? You could spend a lot of money buying sales enablement tools, but unless you understand what they're going to do for your sales organization, slow down, right? You're going to get so excited with, oh my God, look at these reports. These reports are great. Great. Do you have a team that can execute against those reports? Because until you have a team that could respond and make changes, something like Inside Squared may be a little too much horsepower. When you get to the right point, it's fantastic. But again, where do you sit in the life cycle of your organization? And spend wisely.
I'm in violent agreement with Russell. Violent agreement. I think that there are, and I've been in situations where we have over-engineered everything and nothing ever gets used or used effectively. So I have to echo what you say. Be thoughtful, figure out where you are in the process. Look, as salespeople, we're all ADHD. I don't mean to offend anybody. We're all shiny objects. We have too much to do and we're under pressure, and there has to come a point in time where you actually just need to go sell. You don't need to spend 9 hours administering, filling out forms. Go sell and figure out what couple 3, I don't even know what the right number is, tools that you use that are most effective and most productive, and go.
Yeah, definitely concur. I'll take a question here.
Hey Lisa, I had a follow-up question on your point about ROI. Do you do ROI models for every prospect that comes through the door? And what are the downsides of doing ROI models, whether it be elongating the sales process or potentially then being held accountable to an ROI, which, you know, maybe the sale should be based on vision instead of ROI? So
the answer is yes, basically, to your entire. So I can't repeat that whole thing. You articulated it so well. When you do ROI, do you do it for every customer? And what are the pitfalls? And, you know, if it's, do they hold you accountable for the ROI, et cetera? Is that a good synopsis? Thank you. So no, we don't do an ROI analysis for every customer. For me, everything goes back to discovery, discovery, discovery. If you do the best discovery and you can never ask too many questions. Never, ever, ever, ever. So if you ask the right questions and if you do the right amount of discovery, and if you truly understand what the business problem is that somebody's trying to solve, you may or may not do an ROI. We have a lot of efficiency folks who basically say it takes me 3 weeks to get an email out. Well, okay, we can get that down to 3 hours. Is that valuable to you? Well, yeah, it is. You know, then it becomes less of a metric-based ROI. There's a huge efficiency gain there, and we can quantify that. But no, we don't do an ROI for a lot. And here's why. There are 3 things in the world of email that people use email for. Revenue generation, customer engagement, and acquisition. So for revenue generation, the ROI calculator is probably very applicable. For customer engagement, not so much. Unless click-through rates are really important or calls to action are important and it doesn't result necessarily in a sale, we can have an ROI discussion pseudo around engagement. Acquisition, not so much. So, you know, we'll stay away from it. But I think with any kind of ROI, that is the excellent question as far as do people hold you accountable? And that's the reason why so far the answer is no, but I'm waiting for somebody to hold us accountable, which is it's the double-edged sword. And basically the way for us to get away from that is to say, look, there are an implementation of Movable Ink to the nth degree, where you have that perfect world and you can see an 84% lift. Most of that has to do with you, Mr. Customer, not me or my technology. It has to do with your process, your level of commitment, you know, how you execute on that. So there's kind of a way to gracefully exit being held accountable to it. But those are great points, and I think you have to use that all wisely. It's a tool in your kit.
Russ, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to add two things. I think the first thing is when is it right to introduce an ROI, right? So part of that is understanding how a decision is made. What is the decision process? Part of that is getting the buyer to explain to you, well, is there a business justification, and how are you going to build that justification? And do you need assistance in building that justification? That's a tool in your arsenal, is the ROI calculator. And then to make sure that you do it appropriately is to do it in a collaborative fashion with the buyer. But the one thing that I always remind my sales team is, don't introduce things to look smart, because all you're going to do is introduce blockers in a sales cycle. So in other words, if you have a lights out security practice and a security audit, but your customer doesn't need it, don't offer up, hey, do you guys need to do a security audit? Because what are they going to say? Yeah, okay, we're going to do a security audit. So don't introduce objections if you don't need to. If the question comes up, well, how do I defend this purchase? Light bulb goes off, great. Well, we happen to have a great tool, an ROI calculator. We can walk you through it. Can you explain a little bit more on how you go about building your business case? So there's weapons at your disposal. Use them wisely.
Yeah, good point. I mean, always bring it back to what the buyer really needs to make a decision, and nothing more. I'll take a question in the back. Lady in the corner here. Yourself, yeah. Just speak up, and I'll repeat the question. But
So failure came up a few times, and so I was wondering if you could talk more about what was something critical that you learned about your failures, and how did you use that to improve yourself moving forward?
good point. Things that maybe you kind of realized didn't work in your sales process, and you learned from it, and then kind of backtracked and said, okay, let me do it this way. Anything come to mind?
We weren't ruthless enough when it came to qualifying. We went down the rabbit hole. We got chased down with a big deal. I mean, like a company trajectory changing deal. And at a startup level, it's like probably immaterial to most big companies. But for us, it was big. And we just didn't qualify, and we chased it. We shouldn't have. And we wasted engineering time. We wasted a lot of people's time just like huddling around meetings, figuring out how we could get this done, how it could work. And we eventually cut it loose, which really, really hurt. But we got to the point where it was already producing negative returns, and it kills morale. Like, you know, one of the things I think sellers do a lot is that they will say yes to a lot of stuff that they don't currently have in the product, and they create this kind of acrimonious relationship with engineering. Don't do that. Don't, because one day you're going to need a favor for them, and they're never going to do it. And I've actually seen companies go down that path very hard and ultimately just cripple their growth. And I won't say one, but I've worked with one very, very closely. So at DocSend, we try to avoid that at all costs, but it did happen early on when we were like, it was a shiny object, gonna grab it. So be ruthless when it comes to setting your boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, just be careful. Like, I think just emphasize that. You know, be careful of whale hunting, particularly when you're really early on.
Yeah, I think the other thing to be mindful of the rules that are in place and try like mad not to bend them. And so, when I was an individual quota carrier early in my career, there was a query. For those of you who know, it was an elephant of a deal, and they wanted a POC. And we had a rule that was like, we needed executive sponsorship to get a POC. And I don't remember with the song and dance why they couldn't get executive sponsorship. I was so focused on the deal that I wasn't seeing the forest through the trees. And my sales leader at the time was like, there's a reason why they can't bring the executive sponsor to this to the process. And I was like, we've got to do this. And so I was driving on 42nd Street and 7th Avenue, I made an illegal right-hand turn on the phone with McQuarrie's telling me that the POC was turned off and they were they were walking away from the deal, and a police car pulled me over. So I got a ticket for making an illegal right turn with no seatbelt while talking on the phone, losing a $2.5 million deal. So my point is, if you're going to bend the rules, really understand why. The rules are in the place for a reason. And so, you have to understand that there's a method to the madness.
We'll take another question. All right, Jonathan.
Sure. You gave some great insights on how to start a sales organization, turn around a sales organization, accelerate a sales organization, looking at your teams. Any insights on your peers in the management team before you've learned in some of these endeavors?
Well, it's good point. Last month we talked about the CEO's view of sales, right? And that's a really important relationship, but also what's also important is also relationships you have with your other, your executive team. So anything you want to share on that?
I will. I'm a big collaborator. Like I truly believe there's strength in numbers, and I think that, selfishly, the entire organization is basically in business because you need to sell something to somebody, and nothing happens until you sell something. Because if you don't have a customer, or if you don't have anybody who buys something from you, you don't need an organization to support it. So, a little draconian, but kind of true. So for me, in particular, especially with marketing, I told my CMO when I came into the role, I said, this isn't my number, this is our number. And I'm not gonna get to this number without you. And there were predecessors who had a very antagonistic relationship with marketing and blame them for failure. I don't do that. I just think it's a negative vibe to set out, and I also don't think it's true. So for me, collaboration with the executive team, with peers, is critically important to success. It's also a contributor to failure if that's not the case. But you succeed together. Here's what I'll tell you from a sales standpoint. Winning alone is fine. Losing alone is fatal. So whether you're a salesperson and you don't bring people in, that's an adage, but it also applies to the rest of the executive team. I just want to pivot to the board question as well. That's a very sensitive subject when you're dealing with boards. I will tell you that there was a decision that was taken a few months ago to take the operating plan that we had for this year, and there was a very vocal, strong board member who said, those are the numbers? Higher. Just higher, double of what you have in your plan, and get those numbers out, and just go on this. Now, I wasn't part of the conversation because I would have stuck an ice pick in somebody. I wasn't part, but I'm a recipient of this overzealous, just take that engine and throw more coal on it. And it's not the right thing. It's not the right thing. So you need to be very careful and mindful about the advice that you get and how you implement it, whether or not to implement it, and how to manage that whole process. Because I think the intent is great, but the reality can potentially be something very different.
Yeah, you talk about something really, I've seen it in numerous companies. It's not just startups, where the board has one idea of the number, but you're the sales executive on the ground who sees what's going on day in, day out, and you need to bridge that gap. And so oftentimes there can be a big gap between them. Were you itching to?
I've got a lot on this. We got some battle wounds. First, collaboration is an excellent point. I think that the most important thing when you walk into an environment is to explain the why behind why you're doing the things that you're doing. I happen to have an amazing supportive executive team at BetterCloud. And so they have given me full latitude, and I've explained the why. Why am I changing the process? Why am I demanding more out of marketing? I think the point of marketing, there's this tension. Is it a sales qualified lead? Is it a marketing qualified lead? Where does the lead attribution? And I walked into marketing like, I do not give a shit if my sales organization finds 0 leads. If we hit that number because of marketing, you deserve all the credit. I will never fight you on where a lead comes from. I will fight with you on achieving a number. And I think that has to be the posture. I open up, so I have a big deal review, and I open that up, and I invite every functional leader to sit in on the big deal review. We do it every 2 weeks, and I have engineering, product, marketing to all sit and look at the deals through the different lenses and ask questions, because I want an open, collaborative environment. And I think that has worked really well for me in my career. Every job I've walked into, I am a direct person. So I say up front, I don't want to apologize in the future, so I'm going to say this now, my personality, I am very direct. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I hope you will appreciate my honesty. And I've said that to my board members. And I've reminded my board members when things have been heated that, hey, remember the first time we met and I said, but I have always stayed true to that because I do believe that you need to give them, especially board members, they need to hear from feet on the street what is the score. And they may not like the news, but they're making investment decisions based upon data. And so your obligation to them is to, one, do what's best for the company, and two, give them information when it's necessary in real time.
Apologies, I know there's a bunch of folks who have questions out there. We're coming up to the end of our hour here, and it's been amazing how it is. But I do want to ask one last question, and we'll stick around afterward. If you do want to continue to ask your questions, we'll be here for a little while after. But I want to ask this of every panel, has there been something that you've read recently? It could be a movie, but just something that you've come across recently that's been really inspiring and maybe useful in the business sales realm? And whoever wants to kind of take that first. All right.
So the answer is going to be an answer you probably have heard before, but the reason is going to be different. So The Hard Thing About Hard Things, has anyone read that book or know about that book? But not because of what Ben Horowitz says in the content of the actual book. Go to the appendix and read how he outlines what the requirements for a sales leader are and what you should be looking for in a sales leader. And then calibrate that against what your skill set are. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And when I read that, I was like, wow, someone really put thought into what are all the things that a great sales leader is responsible for. And how do I think about and address all of these different things? And it really helped me shape my framework and how I approach my job. And I commend him for putting it. And when I first read it, there was a little bit of a lump in the throat, like, oh shit, this is a real deal. But then I started to think about, like, yeah, this is exactly what I do and how I approach it. And he really put thought into it. And if you are an aspiring sales leader, read it so that you understand what the real job requirements are, because that thing nailed it.
Yeah, so this is a great book, and he hired Brian Cranny as his guy, and Mark Cranny, sorry, yeah. And if you read the story about him, Mark Cranny is the way the story goes is he is not the nicest of people, but definitely the straightest when it comes to mentoring his team. Mine would be From Good to Great. It's kind of an oldie but a goodie. I like the way the book opens up. It says good is the enemy of great. And I like that phrase a lot because, I'm in a startup and every day is a grind. And there are great days and there are really, really bad days. And so you kind of have to reflect on the fact that you're there to do something bigger. And Good to Great really outlines how these companies did it and did it collaboratively. One of the things they focus on a lot is the fact of this autopsy that gets done, this no blame game, just straight up look at it, call it what it is, attack the problem without ego. And that is what you're going to deal with at any stage level company. And so I'd implore you to take a look.
I honestly don't have a specific book that I've read or recently that is as resonant as what you guys cited. I will tell you that I find that I always get people who send me things to read, and they come to me at the right time and, kind of when I need it. It's a little magic, actually, because I go so fast. This goes back to what do you do when you need to relax and relieve stress. I don't do a lot of nonfiction like sales stuff reading because it comes to me, which I'm grateful for. I read fiction in my downtime because I need to disconnect. There is a bunch of different, I can't remember them, but I get blog posts and various articles and things that are always sent to me that are quick and relevant, and that's just where I am in my career at this point, and that's what works for me.
Yeah. A little contrarian. No, fair enough. But good movie you've seen maybe?
What's time for movies?
Hamilton. Hamilton's good.
is off the charts. So
That's amazing.
Let's not go there.
Oh, well, I guess class dismissed. On that note, there we go. Surprise, surprise. Well, we definitely come to the end of the evening. I just want to give a rousing thank you and just for a really, really great conversation.